Part 1. Why hatred is never neutral. There is a specific kind of reaction that should make you pause, not mild dislike, not preference, not taste, but hatred. That instant, sharp response where you feel tension in your body, where your thoughts turn aggressive, where you feel morally superior, disgusted, or deeply irritated. That reaction is never neutral, and it's rarely about the other person, because hatred is not perception, it's charge, and charge always points inward. Here's the core idea of this video. What you intensely hate in others is usually something you have not integrated in yourself. That doesn't mean you act like them, and it doesn't mean you want to be like them. It means the trait exists in you, but in a form you rejected, denied, or split off. Most people misunderstand this idea. They think it's saying, if you hate arrogance, you're arrogant. That's too shallow. What it actually means is this. If a trait provokes strong emotional charge in you, your relationship to that trait inside yourself is unresolved. And unresolved traits don't stay quiet. They shape your reactions, your judgments, and your sense of identity. Hatred is not strength, it's information. It tells you where your psyche is divided. Because when a trait is integrated, you can see it clearly, without heat. You can notice arrogance without needing to attack it. You can notice weakness without despising it. You can notice manipulation without becoming consumed by it. Strong hatred means, this touches something I cannot yet hold consciously. And here's why that matters. Every time you react with hatred, you are no longer choosing freely. You're being pulled into judgment, pulled into comparison, pulled into rigidity. And rigidity is the opposite of self-mastery. So, let's slow this down. Why does the mind project hated traits outward? Because the psyche prefers moral distance over inner conflict. It's easier to say, they are wrong, than to say, this exists in me in a form I don't want to face. Hatred creates a clean split, good versus bad, us versus them, me versus that. And that split protects identity. If you define yourself as not that, you never have to explore what that trait might mean in you. But here's the cost. Anything you fully reject externally becomes unconscious internally. And unconscious traits don't disappear. They operate indirectly. So hatred doesn't eliminate the trait, it hides it. And hidden traits control behavior far more than acknowledged ones. That's why people who hate arrogance often struggle to assert themselves. People who hate weakness often fear vulnerability. People who hate selfishness often neglect their own needs. People who hate authority often avoid leadership. People who hate attention-seeking often suppress their desire to be seen. The hatred is not random, it's compensatory. It forms to keep something locked away. So, the question is not, am I justified in my hatred? The real question is, what does this reaction protect me from seeing in myself? That's where the work begins. In the next part, we'll break down the most common traits people hate, and what those reactions usually point to internally. Part 2. What your hatred is pointing to. Let's get concrete, because this only becomes useful when you can apply it to real reactions. Here are several traits people commonly hate, and what those reactions often indicate. First, arrogance. People who strongly hate arrogance often have a conflicted relationship with confidence. They may have learned early that standing out was punished. That pride led to rejection. That visibility attracted attack. So, confidence was suppressed. And what happens when you suppress confidence? It doesn't vanish. it turns into self-doubt, hesitation, or resentment. So, when someone else displays boldness, it feels offensive, not because confidence is wrong, but because it reminds you of something you denied yourself. Second, weakness. Hatred of weakness often comes from fear of helplessness. If you had to grow up too fast, be strong early, or take responsibility before you were ready, weakness may feel dangerous. So, you reject it, internally and externally. You become self-reliant, controlled, capable. But the cost is emotional isolation. And when you see weakness in others, it triggers the part of you that was never allowed to be weak. So the reaction becomes harsh. Third, manipulation. People who despise manipulation often struggle with directness. They may have learned that asking openly was unsafe, that expressing needs led to rejection or punishment, so needs were expressed indirectly. Later, manipulation becomes morally condemned, but the underlying need remains unintegrated. So the person either suppresses needs entirely or expresses them in distorted ways. The hatred protects against owning desire. Fourth, attention-seeking. Hatred of attention-seeking often hides a suppressed desire to be seen. If attention was conditional, unsafe, or ridiculed, you may have learned to stay small, to not draw focus, to not want too much. So when others seek attention freely, it triggers envy, irritation, or contempt, not because attention is wrong, but because your own need for recognition was buried. Fifth, authority and control. People who strongly reject authority often struggle with their own leadership energy. Maybe authority figures were abusive or unreliable, so authority became associated with danger. Later, the person rejects control altogether, but leadership is still there, unclaimed. So when others lead decisively, it triggers resistance or hostility. Again, the reaction is not about them. It's about a disowned capacity. Now, here's an important distinction. Integration does not mean acting out the trait destructively. If you hate arrogance, integration does not mean becoming arrogant. If you hate weakness, integration does not mean becoming helpless. Integration means reclaiming the healthy expression, confidence without domination, vulnerability without collapse, leadership without control, visibility without performance. When you don't integrate a trait, you only see its distorted forms. When you integrate it, you recognize the full spectrum. That's why people who are integrated can see flaws clearly without hatred. They don't need emotional distance. So, if hatred is the signal, how do you actually work with it? That's the final part. Part 3. Turning hatred into integration. Here's the shift that changes everything. You stop treating hatred as a moral reaction and start treating it as data. Hatred is not a verdict, it's a diagnostic. So instead of judging the reaction, you study it. Here's a simple integration process. First, pause at the reaction. When you feel strong hatred or disgust, don't justify it immediately. Don't suppress it either. Just notice it. Intensity matters. Strong charge means relevance. Second, name the trait precisely. Not, they're awful, but they're arrogant, they're weak, they're needy, they're controlling, they're lazy, they're manipulative. Precision turns emotion into information. Third, ask the uncomfortable question. Where does this trait live in me, even in a suppressed, opposite, or distorted form? Not, do I behave like them? But, what is my relationship to this quality? Do you suppress it, fear it, moralize against it, overcompensate for it? That's where the shadow sits. Fourth, find the origin. Ask yourself, when did I learn that this trait was unsafe or unacceptable? Most of the time, there is a memory, a rule, a decision. That's not allowed. That's dangerous. That makes you unlovable. That's when the split happened. Fifth, reclaim the healthy form. Every rejected trait has a healthy expression. Arrogance hides confidence. Weakness hides vulnerability. Manipulation hides desire. Attention-seeking hides the need to be seen. Control hides leadership. Your task is to express the healthy form consciously. That's integration. And when integration happens, something changes naturally. The hatred dissolves, not because you forced it, but because the inner conflict resolved. You no longer need to distance yourself emotionally. You can see clearly, and clarity creates choice. This is the deeper reason why projection keeps people stuck. As long as you fight traits externally, they remain unconscious internally, and unconscious traits shape your life silently. But once you integrate them, they stop running the system. So here's the test that shows real progress. You can notice traits in others without emotional charge. You may still disagree. You may still set boundaries. But you are not possessed by reaction. That's not indifference. That's inner alignment. And alignment is freedom. Because what you no longer hate outside no longer controls you inside. If this brought someone specific to mind, don't dismiss that. Strong reactions are rarely accidental. If you want more content like this, calm, precise, and focused on real inner change, you can follow this channel. New videos will continue exploring psychology, integration, and self-mastery. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.